Good evening, everyone. Dobry večer. My name is Olesya Chromychuk. I think basically we all know each other, or most of us know each other. I'm the director of the Ukrainian Institute London. It's really nice to see you all here. It's an intimate gathering today, but one that I think is going to be full of very insightful ideas and thoughts. And it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight, Taras Dobko, who has been rector of Ukrainian Catholic University since June 2023. With a doctorate in philosophy, he has more than 20 years of experience of work in the field of higher education. He is responsible for operational management, strategic planning and development of the university, academic culture, establishing international relations, developing support systems, and improving the quality of education and service to the community at Ukrainian Catholic University. He held the position of UKU Senior Vice Rector from 2008, and he was responsible for general management of the university, promoting university autonomy, personnel policy, and establishing a culture of integrated human development for students, professors, and staff. He also headed the council for project of building the UKU campus. And prior to that, he was Vice Rector for academic work at Ukrainian Catholic University, and before that, he was Dean of the UKU Faculty of Theology and Philosophy. Taras is a scholar, of course. He is the compiler and scholarly editor of 4 books and author of more than 40 articles in Ukrainian and international publications. His publications deal with themes of ethics, theology, religious experience, human dignity and relations with God. And in 2003, he earned his doctorate in philosophy and has taught philosophy since 1998 in various educational institutions in Ukraine and Georgia. Taras is the author of various programs and courses at the Ukrainian Catholic University, and Taras, of course, is also the former trustee of the UIL, of the Board of Trustees. And as I'm sure many of you know, Ukrainian Institute London has a long-standing affiliation with Ukrainian Catholic University, and indeed this building speaks to that affiliation. And I'm just going to abuse my position here briefly to share one of my favorite stories of this relationship, because I do find it extremely inspiring. So in 1963, when Patriarch Joseph Slepy was released from his Soviet imprisonment, 18 years of prison camps, he established Ukrainian Catholic University in Rome and proceeded to establish, correct me if I'm saying anything incorrectly there, proceeded to establish affiliates in Europe and North America. And in 1979, he purchased this building. To serve specifically that purpose that essentially serves to this day. At the moment, 79 Holland Park is being managed by St. Sophia Society, and we are extremely grateful to be able to use it for gatherings such as this, for classes, Ukrainian classes and other classes, but also for the needs of the Ukrainian community, because that is exactly what it was designed to be used for. And when I think back to this story, now Ukrainian Institute London is an independent charity, and we're one of the strong voices advocating for Ukraine in the UK and beyond. Ukrainian Catholic University is definitely one of the leading universities, independent universities in Ukraine. In 1979, few people could think that the USSR was going to fall at all or fall anytime soon. Joseph Slepy didn't just think that, he didn't just envisage the changes, he planted the seeds necessary for the rebirth of sovereign, independent Ukraine that we saw emerge in the 1990s. And it's this vision and certainty in change that inspires me when I understand that the planting of the seeds is necessary, even if you realize that you might not be the one benefiting from the fruit. It might be the next generation or the generation after that. In the moments of darkness, and we, I think, all had plenty of those over the last 2.5 years, that is the story that I go back to again and again. And I'm sure you'll be able to share more such stories, inspirational stories with us today. So Taras, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to 79 Holland Park, to Ukrainian Institute London, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Olesya. Good evening to everyone. So I am really pleased to be here with you tonight, and thank you for a wonderful introduction. And I admire the work of the Institute, and I am proud I was for a number of years more closely involved with it. As you mentioned, I was one of the trustees. But there was one disadvantage of being a trustee. So maybe I was too close and I couldn't be a guest speaker. But now, as I am not anymore a trustee, so I could be sitting right now here. So I will be speaking about higher education in Ukraine right now, how we work during the war, and which challenges we have to face. And I will maybe approach this topic more from the point of view of the lived experience rather than or less than policy making, though these issues are connected. And of course policy making in this time should respond to the lived experience of people and somehow to reflect on it. But to set up kind of reference framework for my reflections, I would like to start with a few observations, few facts even, I would say. Just for example, a few days ago, the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine issued a letter in which it notified all universities that there could be significant shortages of electricity and heat during the coming winter, and it urged the universities to start the new academic year already in mid-August, use Saturdays as normal business days, finish the first semester preferably by mid-November, and prolong the academic year till mid-July. So another appeal from the ministry was about getting prepared to receive citizens of Kharkiv or Sumy who might leave the city before winter if they face very likely blackouts and unbearable conditions of life in the cold season. So this is the first observation. The second is about the recent study which was called War and Education, 2 years of a full-scale invasion conducted in Ukraine. And this study showed that every third Ukrainian high school student plans to go abroad and get a higher education there. And such responses are mostly conditioned by, of course, security issues, but also uncertainty about the future, and, for boys, eventual military drafting and mobilization. And the study also shows that it is likely that about 30% of 2024 high school graduates might emigrate from the country. The third observation is that in the last 4 years, Ukrainian 15-year-olds' reading skills and knowledge of natural sciences have significantly deteriorated, and 42% of school students have not reached even a basic level of literacy in mathematics. And this is not just presumption, it's evidenced by the results of the international study of the quality education PISA. It's a program for international student assessment that was conducted in October 2022. Besides, many children of the primary school age don't know what it means to be and learn at school. And universities, of course, are concerned about so-called knowledge and skills gap in their future students. The fourth observation, this year there will be approximately, just imagine the number, 140,000 postgraduate applicants in Ukraine. Traditionally, about 5,000 PhD candidates were studying in the graduate school. That is kind of normal level, for Ukraine. And 2 years ago, 15,000 enrolled in PhD studies. Last year, 18,000. And this year, 140,000 people registered to take exams necessary for application for postgraduate studies. And this leads me to the fifth observation, that we might hear voices like this, and I quote one businessman, Igor Liski: "Why this education at all? How does it help us defeat the enemy if we spend billions of hryvnias on inefficient institutions that produce military service evaders? Because you understand, 140,000 applicants. Where are the technologies? Where are the innovations that should be born in universities? Where is the interaction with military units? I heard that we want to be a MilTech leader in 10 years. What do we do about this? So this is like a kind of framework, a reference framework with which I would like to deal in my reflections. And these are only a few observations that depict, the situation, and I can go on and on to add to those observations. And in such circumstances, I think there are a few lessons to be learned by Ukrainian universities. First, I will mention only 4. First, resilience matters. Second, quality matters. Third, relevance matters. And fourth, entrepreneurial spirit matters. So let me share with you what I mean by this and how I think our university tries to respond to these challenges. So resilience matters. Resilience is a very complex phenomenon, multifaceted phenomenon, which depends on several factors. And of course, resilience could be individual, could be institutional, and it has both spiritual but also very palpable material manifestations like bomb shelters and fuel reserves to produce electricity and heat during blackouts. When we speak about spiritual sources of resilience, we learned at Tukku that values and principles and really matter and are key sources of resilience during the trial, because they really provide ground to stand in this perfect storm that we experience. To have values means that it means to recognize that something is more important than you and your life. And hence, comes the ability not to be preoccupied too much with the survival, but to commit to the victory of good. Ideally, I would say not even to be afraid of death. So you are no longer bound by fear or paralyzed by panic. And these are not only words. Let me mention one, story from our commencement in winter. Usually we have commencements in winter for our graduate programs, which last for 1.5 years, and also in summer, this week, the main commencement. So in winter, there was the valedictorian, a student, our graduate, Lyubov Krutyak, who addressed the audience on behalf of all other graduates. And she mentioned that while preparing for this speech, she asked her classmates and other graduates what they learned from studying at Tukku, what lesson they would remember for many years. And the answer was, I quote, "We have learned how to live a life such that we will not be afraid of death," end of quote. These are words of 25, 30-year-old Ukrainians who know from their experience, I think, what their dignity is, and that their dignity is rooted not in wealth, power, or self-glory, but in eternity, ultimately in God Himself, and that this dignity could not be taken away from them. And I think that, we found out that one can withstand trials and not break if he or she has preserved even a drop of such dignity. I think that this dignity, this sense of dignity, really contributes to the ability to remain human in often inhuman circumstances, and to promote this sense of dignity is what UKU tries to do in its work. Also, what we learned is that a sense of development is very important for building resilience in war circumstances. In general, I think, the feeling of development, not of inertia, of, stagnation, is very important for any institution, but especially, I would say, for the academic community. And because otherwise, feeling of stagnation is demoralizing, and prospect of development is one of the key motivators. And of course, in academic setting, development can mean many things. It could be about quantitative growth of educational programs, students, teachers, grants, and some universities aim at such a development. But it could be also about reaching a new level of quality in academic programs, about some radical changes in the business model. For example, we will be really enhancing the number of short-term certificate programs as an offer to the society. But it also could be about introducing new forms of didactics, for example, service learning or digital pedagogy. I will talk about it a little bit later. Or about greater attention to the professional growth of teachers and employees. So we try to navigate, different kinds of this development so that really the community feels we move forward. We have this vision of the future. Then one more way to strengthen resilience is to build, of course, partnerships. So during the war, many Ukrainian universities excelled in this, building different international partnerships. So we built a fascinating network of solidarity with almost 40 universities worldwide to send our students for exchange programs and enable them to get kind of more normal learning experience. And some universities, like the University of Notre Dame, engaged even more deeply in collaboration and dedicated for their program called Standing in Solidarity, $2 million US dollars in investment. That actually this collaboration went beyond just student exchange or faculty exchange and included joint research projects. And other universities like Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, they launched the project Global Kyiv-Mohyla, also building these exchange programs with other universities. But also partnership in Ukraine, because it is necessary, I think, for our universities in Ukraine to face the truth that the government of Ukraine will not soon have adequate resources for financing world-class education and science in Ukrainian universities. Honestly speaking, nowadays higher education in Ukraine is financed primarily by taxpayers of Ukraine's allies. So US, UK, European allies, so these are borrowed or granted money. And if you take, for example, Stanford, its annual budget is in 2024-23 was 8.9 billion US dollars, and this is much more than the budget for all public and private universities in Ukraine combined. And only by working together, I think we can achieve something. And thus, for example, UKU and Kyiv School of Economics initiated the Alliance of Ukrainian Universities as a genuinely bottom-up initiative based on common principles and goals. And this initiative is dedicated to spreading in Ukraine the model of so-called engaged university that wants to contribute to the development of society. And last but not least, unfortunately I cannot show you, but also beauty is an important strategy of resilience, as we have learned. So during the war, in our main church of Saint Sophia, the Wisdom of God, we created beautiful mosaics. And we feel that creating beauty in the conditions of war also contributes very much to resilience. Quality matters. We believe that there should be no compromise about quality in education. And I must say it is not easy to maintain quality in the time of war, during the war. For example, some people expect you to relax, standards, asking for excuses. Others, especially, I know from when it comes to submitting, final thesis. So students often say, okay, we couldn't do it, we didn't have enough time, or the circumstances were such and such. but we are strict about it. Others consider a commitment to quality a luxury when the country is in flames. Many try to preserve at least the minimum, whatever is possible, in the forced transition to almost complete remote education. And for many students, honestly speaking, who were exposed to online learning, pursuing education loses its appeal and becomes like a secondary importance when compared with rising job opportunities, because brain drain and military mobilization create shortages in the job market already and make companies fill the gaps with students where possible. So to maintain quality education is genuinely an achievement in the present circumstances, but it is our conviction that this is the only way to emerge eventually victorious out of this turmoil. And this is the only way to keep young people in Ukraine and not go abroad for their studies. Because now we feel that we compete not only for new students, not only with each other within Ukraine, inside Ukraine, but also with international schools. And guess, we don't have very good data, but there is one company, Study UA, that works with people to help young people to go to some international universities, and they interviewed like 1,000 of their clients, and guess what country was on the top for the last year where young Ukrainians went for their undergraduate education? No, Poland is only the third. It's the United Kingdom. So 25% of those people actually went to the United Kingdom. So the second was Netherlands, and only Poland was third. So the first thing also to do to care about quality is to respond to the knowledge gap issue I already mentioned. And school administration and parents blame the distance learning format and air alarms that interrupt the educational process, but also inability of students to learn independently as the main culprits for the knowledge gap. Another worrying trend is isolation. For several years, many children in Ukraine have been studying online or in a mixed format, and as a result, they lack socialization skills and the ability to communicate well. So they have to acquire these skills at universities, and therefore, higher education institutions should actually introduce additional adaptation courses or programs for first-year students. That's what we do when we have special orientation and training programs to help students adapt to a new environment and teach them communication and interaction. Another tool that we use is to fill the knowledge gap is the core curriculum program, which is offered to all students, on campus, whatever program they pursue. So in the triad, to achieve excellence in learning, you have to have three components. So you have to have motivation, you have to have good didactics, and you have to have excellent content. I would say that during these last years, we focus more on motivation and pedagogy components. Because if you have an excellent content, excellent teachers, but motivation is lacking, with students, so whatever you do, you will not be able to achieve, success. So we created a Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning to support faculty in professional development. We introduced project-based learning approaches in more and more courses. We allocated special funding for engaging students as teaching assistants. We're also going to introduce the liberal arts and sciences approach to structure academic programs more in a way a major and minor system works. And it will also help students to make their educational trajectory more informed and mature. And there are many other initiatives. So relevance matters. One of the most important steps, I think, during the war was to help people students especially, regain control over their lives and reclaim the meaning of their activities. That was extremely important because the experience of war could be overwhelming, and it is bigger than anyone could process on his or her own. And too much, chaos in human life is just unbearable. So it was important to bring back a sense of control for students over their lives as soon as possible. And we, understood, you cannot stop the war, but you can contribute to the victory in some way. So designing even and keeping a day schedule becomes a way of regaining some agency. So our students also were engaged very much in various volunteer activities. We also paid much effort to transform our curriculum to make it more meaningful and relevant to the current challenges. A few months ago, I met with a group of 20 UKU student leaders who I think have a clear answer to the most important question today: what are we doing for Ukraine's victory? They represent 6 student initiatives and organizations that help the Ukrainian armed forces in different ways. For example, some students produce special candles, power banks, by the way, very powerful power banks, and 100 cheaper than you would purchase on the market. They send it to, to use in the front line. Or heating devices, drone batteries, and camouflage nets. They also organize fundraising events for support and rehabilitation of wounded soldiers. And these are really dedicated, mature, and responsible young people. They have been working for already 2 years, and these are people with dignity, and I think these are people on whom the future of Ukraine will depend. The war, of course, defines an agenda for our action, and in our university we decided that we will focus a lot on the interaction and collaboration with local communities especially, and to help revitalize them, to strengthen their capacity for the post-war recovery and development. One important reason for this is so-called principle of subsidiarity, one of the most significant principles of a decent society, because we think that the problems in a human person's life should be solved as much as possible on the level of local community where they live, and without turning to any anonymous regional or central government authorities. So we have started 2 major projects which engage a wide network of universities and local communities in Ukraine. One involves already mentioned Alliance of Ukrainian Universities, and it's about the role of universities in strengthening local communities and shaping a model of interaction between universities and local communities. Another project is about expanding so-called service learning culture in Ukrainian universities and tailor them to the needs of Ukraine's local communities. Service learning is not just volunteering, it's not just practice. It's an educational approach, it's pedagogy that helps to acquire academic knowledge, practical skills, and socially responsible attitudes through solving real-life problems within the community and together with the community. So, for young people, it's very important to give a sense that they are part of a bigger life mission, and that they are meant, to fix the world. And there are many things that need to be fixed now in Ukraine. And also, this is one of the best ways to make students and teachers feel that their studies and teaching are relevant and meaningful during wartime. Special attention at UKU will be given to non-degree programs, as I have already mentioned. So the plan is to scale up certificate programs, online courses, summer schools offered by UKU units, and to bring them together in so-called UKU School of Integral Human Development, which will serve as a hub for continuing and executive education. UKU also, aims to broaden its impact on society by creating the so-called UKU network of impact. We speak about small UKU and big UKU. Small UKU is 3,000 people, so it's 2,300 full-time students and 700 employees. But when we count, parents of students, when we count benefactors, of course, alumni, so we become big. So we don't know exactly, the number, that it is more than 20, maybe even 30,000 people. And we, asked an ambitious question: can we somehow learn how to work with this big community and to energize it and to engage it into community-based initiatives? So we will see, but we are building, to do that, we understand we have to have a digital tool. So now we are in the process of creating so-called, digital twin of such a community that would allow us to be in touch with all these people and see what connections could arise in this network. Also, we are launching the Alumni in Action initiative to reach out to alumni who are interested to become agents of change in their communities and help them to realize, accomplish certain projects. And one way to do it, very concrete, is to launch several alumni clubs across the country. So we already started one in Ivano-Frankivsk, the next one will be in Kyiv, then in Dnipro. So the idea is to unite alumni locally in different cities and locations. A lot of work is dedicated to the issue of healing the wounds of the war, and I will not mention everything. Maybe I will tell more in our QA session. But we have already opened the Office for Veterans and their Families Affairs. We launched a small but still medical clinic that will be focused on mostly on physical rehabilitation. Our legal clinic helps wounded veterans who are treated in VIV rehabilitation centers claim their rights to social benefits. And our Institute of Mental Health is a leading partner for the First Lady of Ukraine initiative, How Are You, to reform mental health services. And finally, entrepreneurial spirit matters. So now, there is a heated debate about the practicality of introducing elements of corporate governance in universities in Ukraine. In particular, it is about giving real and not just declarative powers to the supervisory boards, for example, to elect the rector, about the introduction of the positions of CFO, Chief Financial Officer in universities, CIO, Chief Information Officer, HR service, new financial instruments such as endowments and investment committees for managing them, and many other things. Some experts say this would make universities in such time more efficient, more flexible, more independent, and maybe even more financially sustainable. And Olesa is already smiling because there is another, view that there are fears that the strengthening of corporate governance in universities may dangerously lower this level of self-governance and harm even the principle of motivation of academic community to acquire and transfer knowledge for the sake of the development of the human person and society, and not for the sake of the monetization of this knowledge. And so during the war, as you can imagine, universities found themselves even more stretched in this respect. On the one hand, the state, I mentioned that, has less and less money. The market for educational services is radically changing due to the acute demographic crisis, and it is increasingly necessary, somehow it seems, to include market logic in the way of decision making. On the other hand, in times of crisis, universities are expected even more to provide social leadership and really to be involved even more in community life and create new meanings, explore new terms of social contract, and generate hope and faith in the future, and not to be preoccupied with these financial issues. In a sense, this is a search to a perennial question about how to be an entrepreneurial university without turning into a university enterprise. So, and this is a way of balancing, which is very difficult, but it is, I think, possible. And we were engaged as a university in this art of balancing and finding equilibrium between these, polar positions already for many years. So KU has a supervisory board with real powers, CFO, full-fledged HR, CIO, and recently even we introduced a position of Chief Innovation Officer, who is responsible for building this network of impact that I mentioned. On the other hand, UKU has an advisor to the rector on the mission of the university, a deputy rector for pastoral affairs and issues, a beautiful church in the heart of the campus, our basic principles, and everything else that allows us to remain and feel like people with dignity. And in the end, my job description, so you mentioned, many things for which I am responsible, but my job description really could be kind of traced down to two things, to a simple formula. On the one hand, implementation of the university mission and preserving university's identity, but also raising £5 million through fundraising each year. So, and I am in my person, try to balance these two things. So a few years ago, we also established an entrepreneurship center, the first in Ukraine angel fund, which is connected to the university to finance some startups. Also programs for the development of entrepreneurship and the formation of a culture of entrepreneurship are being implemented, and startups are emerging and growing. For example, one of the recent developments, we have a joint program with Stanford University, which is called Stanford Ignite Ukraine, for young entrepreneurs of small and mid-size businesses to help them to help them to get networking resources from the world of business and to get a best educational experience in the Silicon Valley. Of course, I would again mention that everything, that all of this, and including international recognition, becomes possible primarily because our university is a mission-driven university, and we don't want to compromise, mission, pursuing these financial things as well. And by the way, it's interesting, for example, that last year, Ukraine's technology sector recognized UKU, religiously affiliated Catholic University, as top IT university in the country. And as you understand, IT is very well developed in Ukraine. So I think that there are people and educational institutions in Ukraine that are resilient, that care about quality, offer relevant education, and are entrepreneurial in their spirit and action. We don't know, of course, what awaits us, in the future, and there will probably be many more challenges and trials. But what we understand that, today we live in debt with a sense of borrowed time, which we borrowed from, members of our community who sacrificed their lives. Unfortunately, already, 30 people from larger UKU community were killed on the battlefield, and 11 of them are alumni. And we understand that this should be a productive time where we as a university should, our main job actually is to generate hope. And it means also a vision of the future of our country, but also work a lot on the ability of people, of young people, to implement them. In general, I have, from my experience of the war and meeting many people in Ukraine, I feel we have really great people with great ideas. What we still lack, really, resources to implement those ideas and achieve these objectives that they presuppose. But I hope it will come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taras. Thank you. What an amazing overview of the really profound challenges, but also fantastic solutions that you've proposed to navigate those challenges. I am going to only restrict myself to one question, then open the floor. I was lucky to see you just over a week ago in Lviv, in your beautiful building in Sheptytsky Center, and you gave me this strategy document, which I read with great interest. And there, I was particularly interested in the section that you touched upon, and I'm glad that you did, of Ukubian University that heals war wounds. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more about a part of that, especially in relation to accommodating displaced students. And of course, that didn't begin in 2022. So I taught a module in UKU in 2019. And I think among 20 or so students that were taking my module, quite a few were displaced already then. I had students from Crimea, I had students from Luhansk, Donetsk, from all over Ukraine, really. So how have you been accommodating them from 2014 up until 2022? And also, I assume that that's increased hugely after the full-scale invasion. Tell us a little bit more about that.
You know, I would say that now mostly they are accommodated. So you would not, I would say, even kind of distinguish them as a, you know, separate category. So I think there was a time when students were making decisions, you know, where to land and, you know, what to do. But at the time, now most of them already did make, you know, this decision, and those who wanted to stay with the university, so we were helping to, you know, find scholarships to finance, you know, their studies, you know, with us. What we are more thinking now is really about the coming winter, because as I mentioned, really there could be that some universities will not be able to exercise their operation in Kharkiv, for example, or in Sumy. And the question is, can we be helpful in some respect? Could be, for example, we are thinking, can we, if this happens, can we restructure, you know, our activity so that, for example, one building we will give to, let's say, Sumy State University, perhaps. So we are now in the process of reflection, you know, about it, or maybe, you know, to give building for living, as we did in the first months of the full-scale invasion, when the building, one of the buildings was turned into a shelter for people. So we will see. But I would say that now we are rather thinking about the future than about the present. I think at present
it's all at hand.
Yeah.
Great, fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much. Let me open the floor now. We have quite a lot of time for questions. Should we want to use it? Yes, Yuna.
I do have a question. Thank you so much. Wonderful topic. It's very interesting to learn. I do have a question, maybe a bit outside of the UKU specifically, but UKU is, and Kyiv-Mohyla is one of the model leading university. In Ukraine, we have way high number of mediocre university who are seeing their mission as basically prepare a workforce for some specific things, largely. First of all, did you try to engage and communicate with this type of university? Like my first education was in Dnipro Financial University, something like that, and it was a bad education. So do you have any form of encouragement of model change in other universities, especially on the periphery in regionals? That's the first question. And the second question is related more to relationships with the government, because we have the ministry, right? I know that you're a private institution, if I'm not mistaken, but is there any interaction with the ministry and how state versus private higher educations actually collaborate together, especially in times of war?
Thank you so much. Two excellent questions. About the first one, so I will give you some examples what we do. I think we don't do enough, so it should have been more. So, but in some areas we try to spread, let's say, some, you know, elements of, let's say, UKU, you know, culture or operation. For example, we had a meeting at UKU which was called by actually the government, by the Center for Mental Health, which is attached to the government. So it was not by the ministry, but really the center that was created like on the request of the First Lady, you know, to manage this mental health, you know, reform in the country. And the meeting was for rectors of Ukrainian universities. There were 40 of them, mostly from, what's interesting how they chose, it was their choice, but mostly universities of technology. So about really offering mental health services to students and faculty in a university setting, how to build a model, because we actually did it. We still improve it, but we were sharing, for example, our experience. Of course, you can guess what other universities are interested mostly in when they get in touch with UKU, and what kind of training they would expect us to provide, for them. It's about fundraising. So though we try, to use opportunities to also to speak about, for example, our core curriculum I mentioned, or for example, we have this American-British, system of so-called living learning communities. This means about dorms. So our dorms really are great, and students love to live in dorms, not only because of the quality of the building, but about the quality of the content, what happens there. So it's a special community with special program, and we also try to spread this experience. I mentioned that we built this alliance, but honestly speaking, of course, we were attracting those universities which share common values and principles and would like to pursue common objectives. We don't reach too much to those universities maybe that you have had in mind. And one more observation. I will be crude, saying this, but before the full-scale invasion, the situation was such that step by step somehow the educational market was pushing out some bad universities out of the market. And now, because of what I mentioned in one of my observations, some of them could have a renaissance, really attracting students just for the sake of evading military service. Unfortunately, it could give a second breath for those universities. And about state and private and the government, one of the interesting development that I hope will be accomplished and completed. So it's an introduction of so-called state grants for education. And many, state universities don't like it, but the idea, because they think that, they will lose, money they would have a claim to, because it is so that students will be given those grants, and they could carry them to any university, also to private universities. And one one reason why also this is helpful I think is in the present circumstances, because it will broaden the number of students in Ukraine who will receive some kind of state funding, because now it's either or situation. So either you pay fully for your education, or either you are given a state subsidy to cover everything. So, and somehow it will give the third option and will increase the number of students who can use at least partially some funding, state funding, to cover their education. So in this sense, the government is doesn't want to discriminate private universities, but really to care about quality of education, that should decide for where to allocate the state funding. But on the other hand, the government made a very controversial decision, for example, discriminating private universities, when it decided to allow semester mobility for students from state universities. Now they could go abroad for one semester if they have a collaboration with some international universities, but not for the private universities. So for example, our male students are not allowed to go abroad. And this was done without any further explanation, and without even consulting, with what's still a big problem in Ukraine, I think, for these 33 years in each sector of social life, in healthcare, in education, in energy sector, in whatever sector, I think there are already players who want to play a fair game and who should be consulted always when the government wants to introduce some change or some new policy. I think this is like a common sense. If you want to change something, go first of all and ask those who really are fair players. And does this policy benefit you or harm you? What do you think about it? And this is not, still a common, practice. And then these situations arise that I described, unfortunately. So there is still much, to do about it.
More questions, please. Yes, please.
Sorry, it's your personal, your university personal interpretation, these programs that only male can exchange
No, I mean
because
that.
according law, as I know, it's for both, for male and for female.
No, female students could go all the time. So for the mobility.
This program for 1 semester.
That's the decision was that male students could be allowed to go abroad for 1 semester.
But this did not apply to private universities?
But not applied to private university, only to state universities.
But is it under the Erasmus program or any program?
Any. Even Erasmus mobility.
Harold, please.
Coming back to the figure you mentioned, is 140,000 applicants. Is that for all?
Yes. So because they have to register, to take some exams if they want to be accepted for PhD studies.
And how many then come to you for?
So I don't know the number. I mean, how many applicants registered for, our programs, but it is also much more than before. But I can kind of tell you that we will be, very selective.
How do you deal with that in terms of your capacities, and also how is it seen by society? Do you become then a tool for evading military service? In the view of some?
It's a good question, and I of course I cannot guarantee 100% that we didn't get some people as our students who would as like military service evaders, but I always joke to do that there are always much cheaper options, because our programs are expensive. So, and I think for a lot of people who really are motivated to evade, military service, they would not turn to us, because they could turn to universities that are cheaper 5 times than we. I mean, our programs. So but this is really helpful. It somehow pushes out such people. But it was with bachelor and with master level. Of course, we give stipends. For example, last year, 53% of the first year students in our undergraduate program received some kind of financial support to cover at least part of their tuition. And to achieve it, we have interviews with each student. So it's time consuming, energy consuming, but we would like to really to see. And for example, this year we also already have quite a lot of interviews, and we were told that I think at least 50 students were turned down because it from this interview became clear that they are not really in need, or they don't have really motivation to study at our university. For example, they pursue only because there is some prestige, and we don't want, just students who would go motivated by, prestige and not by some more important reasons. But I don't know yet how we will deal with this new phenomenon of PhD, candidates. So we will see. We still have to discuss it.
Oh, all of a sudden, lots of questions. So 3 questions here and then 2 questions here.
Taras, first of all, thank you so much for sharing such a great experience in Baku, and I'm very happy that Baku continues to champion Ukrainian education and good quality education in Ukraine. And I think this way or another it is going to be a very good, and it is a very good example for other universities, whether state or private, which is good, and I'm very happy that you continue to work. But the question is, it's Ukrainian Catholic University. Is religion interwoven into curricula, for example, and everyday activities of students, and has it become more influential after this full-scale invasion?
Well, thank you for your question. It is. It is in this way. Just to understand that anybody could become a student of the university, irrespective of their religious, conviction. So there are. I saw a Facebook post by one of the directors of so-called EP, Ethics, Politics, Economic program, and they interview people who applied for these stipend scholarships to cover, as I mentioned, at least part of tuition. And he mentioned, without giving details or names, about a girl, who applied, who said, I am kind of, atheist, but in her, for example, in her vision of social life, he wrote, she demonstrated the best understanding of social teaching of the church, in her vision of social life. So, in a sense, we think that what we, offer is a menu of different, proposals on campus. And, for example, some could be obligatory, like part of the core curriculum are 2 courses in either in theology or in religious studies or in the history of the church, but students are those who choose out of like 10 courses that we provide in this kind of block, or in this small, let's say, part of this core curriculum. So then we have, for example, some students interested in, they like, go for pilgrimages. And others, for example, students are interested in singing in the church choir, church choir. And again, I told the story of a young woman who she wanted to sing, and she came to choir. She knew nothing about God, but somehow she was introduced to some religious experience through the choir. We have a student theater that performs a lot of performances that are that have a spiritual grain in it, and this is also the way for some students to get acquainted with religion. We have an expectation that any student studying at KU would get better understanding of religion, of Christianity, of Ukrainian Christianity, of its history. But of course, to do that, it's not enough that only we make this offer, provide this menu of different proposals. Motivation of students matters. And of course, it is important, I will always say that there is a beautiful phrase by Witold Gombrowicz. He said, it's important not to turn God into a gun with which you would like to kill, Marx or Freud or whoever else. But, we, on the other hand, we also try not to be, how to say, like apologetic about our Christian identity, and we are very outspoken about to future students that we are Catholic universities, and they will meet, on campus certain, proposals that they should be not surprised with, and hopefully respond to. So that's, I think, our policy in this respect.
Questions, please.
Thank you for your amazing speech today and for all the work that you're doing in this, crazy times that Ukrainians have to live in. I think my question goes back to what you said, quoting the certain businessmen and the overall skepticism about the education sector in general in Ukraine right now by certain actors, and perhaps I'm just assuming that this might affect even subjects of humanity a bit more than a bit more practical subjects that are perhaps going to translate into job market or help the war efforts and actually delivering the victory in the end. So I'm just wondering if you've seen students necessarily going with more technical subjects rather than humanities, or do you see this as a challenge to the sector of humanities in studying of social sciences in general? You are, scholar of philosophy by training, so I'm just wondering, what would you answer to that criticism that comes from the business sector, and if this already translates into certain, choices that students are making?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Thank you. I don't really see this shift during the war. So rather, it was very clear before the full-scale invasion. But we see, I think, in general, people in Ukraine see that this war and this, fight is also about senses. So, and, historians or, leaders in culture or, philologists or whoever else in humanities are as well important for the victory as, people in technologies. And I think, I mentioned this quote, which is a bit of exaggeration, of course, because, when one looks more closely, really in many universities of technologies, a lot of work is going on in terms of, technological advancement, of different means of the war, especially, of course, drones. And Mikhailo Vinnytsky, the deputy minister for education, who is responsible for higher education, he even once mentioned that actually, for example, those drones that fly these really, huge distances, incredible, more than 1,000 kilometers, they were developed in some university, setting. So the work is going on, and for example, even some, I will give you an example from UKU. Before the full-scale war, we were struggling about our master program in history, because we saw that really what you mentioned, the number of people interested in history in Ukraine is dropping. And we somehow put it on hold, and for 3 years we did not ask students to come for this program, and people were working how to transform it, to rearrange it. And then we decided we will make a program in heritage studies. So, and we relaunched it, and it was very kind of popular demand, for it. So, and already during the full-scale invasion, because as I mentioned, somehow history became again in humanities very prominent in this situation.
I knew you had a question. Yeah.
Thank you very much. You mentioned, I know that there's an increasing relationship with Nottingham University here in the UK. What
kind of benefits have you seen, if any, from that relationship? What have you learned? And alternatively, what do you feel that Nottingham University has maybe learned or have been surprised about learning about Ukrainian universities and what did they know much about the education system and you know, how did they feel about that?
Thank you. About the second part of this of your question, I will be more prepared to answer tomorrow when I meet the Vice Chancellor of the University of Nottingham.
You'll have to come back and share.
Yeah. So, but you know why I will meet her? Because it was her who invited me to go tomorrow for the Wilton Park dialogue on knowledge diplomacy. So already this connection, you know, is working. So they are co-sponsoring, you know, this session in the Wilton Park. It's a think tank that's part of Foreign Office here in the United Kingdom, and they decided to invite, you know, they needed a representative from Eastern Europe, and they decided to invite me, you know, to come. But one of our first, you know, projects was really this heritage studies program, and it's a joint degree program, or I would say rather not joint, rather double, you know, degree program, which at the moment goes more one way, because it's our students who will, you know, get a degree from UKU and from the University of Nottingham, but also a part of this collaboration were some joint research projects between humanities, you know, scholars of two universities, and I really hope that. And by the way, so with this program, we decided we are going for international, you know, accreditation, and this will also, I think, allow to attract, you know, next funding to continue, you know, this collaboration. So in this respect, I think that the experience of the University of especially international experience of the University of Nottingham is very important for us, because they have enormous number of students. I think that's about 50,000 students, and they have also campus in Malaysia, I believe, and in China. So I think it's interesting for us from the point of view precisely of knowledge diplomacy, because I didn't mention that, but really there's a heritage studies program. It's a program in preparing cultural diplomats. So this is what the institute, Ukrainian Institute, is doing here, how to, you know, convey the right understanding of Ukraine to the international arena. And we need, you know, people who are capable to do it, who are trained to do it. And in a sense, one of the mission of our university in the next few years is to engage with those universities and institutions that we don't have a direct relationship. And for example, it's already happening, because through the University of Nottingham, we got access to the University of Erlangen in Indonesia. And now we are doing 5 COIL, so-called COIL courses. COIL is Collaborative Online International Learning, where one professor from UKU and one professor from Indonesia, they design a course which will be taught online, virtually, for 2 audiences, one in UKU, another in this university. And these are courses about, one course is about, you know, culture, to get to know culture and history of both countries. Another course is about how to do business, you know, in Ukraine and in Indonesia. And somehow in this way, UKU could also become a bridge for example, Ukrainian businesses who could be interested in Indonesia and who know nothing about Indonesia right now. But we have to, go through first through this way of getting to know each other. And here, as you see, the University of Nottingham plays a very concrete role. It introduces us to its partners, for example, in these countries, who don't know much about Ukraine.
We should be wrapping up. So the last question, please. Yes.
My question really.
Oh, did you have a question as well? We can combine. We can combine as well.
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
My question really fits into the previous one, but it's more general. I was going to ask, are you aware of collaborations programs that universities in Ukraine run together with universities in UK? And also on the other side, are there programs for the students that are currently displaced because of the war that are studying here to reintegrate back into Ukraine, or maybe to support them while they're overseas, while they're studying?
Shall we collect the two questions?
Different. Actually, may I start with a comment first? Because I wanted, it made me smile when you said you didn't want students just because of prestige of the university, but I did want to congratulate you on the prestige of UKU. So my niece studies at the Kyiv Mohila Academy, and she's been she's been trying to persuade her mom to move her to UKU. It was like, why? I mean, she's doing law at Kyiv Mohila, she's still doing that, but the fact that people from Kyiv Mohila Academy who are doing law want to go to UKU is a credit to to the strength of the reputation. But the question I had was more about the issues that you talked about, the relevance, resilience and quality, and how important they are, especially during the tough times of the war. Whether that's something that I didn't quite understand whether it's something that just that your university focuses, or whether that's something broader that the Ministry of Education kind of pushes to other universities, because they are so important. So that was my
Thank you.
A question about reintegration.
Yes, about the first
Reintegration of students who are studying here to go back to.
No, that was the second, and the first was. Actually, this this collaboration with the University of Nottingham is a part of this tuning program. So, of course, we are aware. So, we hope that it will be continued. We don't know yet, but it's our hope. And about integration, it's a very good question. We discussed if we should kind of make an appeal or a target, those students young people who went abroad, and provide, fully online degrees. And we decided not to do that. I mean, as full degrees, because we believe that we cannot convey this UKU experience in this way, to young people. And for us, it's degree is not only about knowledge, even not only about skills, but what we talked about also attitudes and about integral human development, which is impossible to do online. But of course, what we do, we started the whole platform which is called UKU Online, and which offers different courses and in different areas in leadership. And in this way, somehow we try to think about those people. We would like young people who are abroad, not in Ukraine, to join such courses. And even these are not courses for credit, though. So these are really courses done in a very attractive way. As you can imagine, yes. So it's really about some community and some ties building. So this is what we decided really to do, but not really to pursue full-fledged online degree program. I explained the reasons, and there are. I think that, for example, those universities which are part of this alliance would sign under all these all these things that I mentioned, and also Kyiv Mohila Academy. I think that already there are quite a few universities that understand and really care about all these things. So it's not
That's
just,
good. Yeah, that's
it's
good
a,
to
it would be, it's terrible to be lonely. So, but we are
But it's
not alone.
But it's not promoted at the ministry
Oh yes, yes. Actually, all these things, in a sense, I speak more, kind of spoke more from the lived experience, but I would say all these 4 things somehow are discussed or implemented already in some policies. For example, already more responsibility is given to students to shape their learning, trajectories. Already, so the law is already passed, which would allow us to make to make a transition to what I mentioned. Now students are accepted from the very beginning to a program in some specialty from the very beginning. And what is proposed and already possible to do, the student enter a broad field in the university, for example, humanities. And then during their 3rd or 4th semester, decide what they pursue, history or languages or some other topics. And the same could be done also, for example, in technology. And we are now thinking by what we call liberal arts and sciences curriculum. So somehow to introduce common curricula tailored to some area, some subject area, some field, and then help students to make choice in their 2nd year, which would be more, as I said, more informed and conscious, because when students are, though the war made young people more mature, it was our experience that they really matured, in 2 months, as if 2 years have passed, and in a sense, still when they are 17 years old, it's very difficult to figure out what is my, calling, where to study. So this will be already allowed. With this also universities should care more about quality if they want to attract these students who will come with state grants, to them. So in a sense, there are already reforms about governance as well. Also, that's most discussed at the moment.
Thank you. Taras, let me ask you one very final question, which is based on what you said in your talk earlier. It's very simple. You have a minute to answer. How will education help us win the war?
It's really simple to answer because education is about preparing people for life. It's about, I don't like this how to say this concept, the kind of human capital, because I don't want to talk about people as capital, but or resources or human resources, but really we understand that the future of Ukraine and of post-war reconstruction depends on people. I like very much what First Lady says in one sentence. She says we have to, if we recover or renew or if we restore a human person, we will restore everything. And this is about education.
What a wonderful place to end this fantastic conversation. Please join me in thanking Taras Dobko for joining us tonight and sharing.
Thank you.